And now you have your pattern. First thing we're going to do with the pattern is when you pull the pattern out, we're actually only going to be using one section of the pattern. So the one that says the 7/6 doesn't need to be used. But the other piece you're going to pull out. And this is where your second pair of scissors comes in handy, because I don't even like to use my sewing scissors on the paper. So this is a piece you don't need. Oh, yours is different because yours is a different size. You do need this. You're going to cut out one pattern piece 1, 2, 3, and 4 off of the other one. Okay. Now, I will tell you, my larger size pattern is a different size. This number 4 is for the elastic. I've never had a pattern piece for elastic, but that's what it shows. I will probably show you later how I do the elastic instead of using a pattern piece. But so actually, if you just start with 1, 2, and 3 today, and you can fold up the rest and put them back in your pattern. So that's the first thing, and then what we're going to do is we're going to dry iron the pattern just to get the wrinkles out of it. When you're cutting out your pattern, it's right here. Make sure you cut on the solid line, not on any of the dotted lines, because that is the other sizes. So don't cut on this where it says lengthen or shorten here. Don't cut on this one where it says cut here for A, B, or C. You could just as easily fold those up if you ever decide to change and make it. It's easier to fold up at that point and just pin it up so that you still have your full pattern. Okay, so after you dry iron your pieces, then you're going to take your material and make sure it's ironed flat. Pretty much. This one you'll be more careful about getting the wrinkles out, so that when it gets pinned down, you don't have a place that pulled, like tucked over or something. When you're doing a steam iron, my suggestion is use distilled water. That way you won't have any mineral buildup. I have well water, so I would definitely have some buildup on the base of my iron if I didn't use distilled water. So we're going to steam iron this to get some of the wrinkles out of it, because she's got a cotton, probably 100% cotton, or a cotton blend. We'll use steam if necessary. Dry iron your pattern pieces, and your material should be ironed. And this piece is not, because I wasn't going to use all of this, so I only ironed what I needed. I may end up making my top out of this and having a 2-piece outfit when I'm done, because I already had this material. And this is that, I may have showed you some similar stuff. It's called Challis, if I'm saying it correctly. And so it's got a different feel than cotton. But cotton is fine. That is actually recommended. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about some pattern pieces. And I still have one of mine pinned on here. So when you're looking at your pattern, you can see I did not cut mine down to size, because Abby and I are slightly different sizes. So I just folded this over. There's something on your pattern piece that says green. And I'm not seeing it on this one. I know it's on the smaller ones, the smaller pieces. It says grain line. Okay, and usually that's the way that the pattern or the material actually runs. It may also have to do with the stretchiness. I'm not exactly sure. But one thing for sure is if you have a print pattern that say is like a plaid or a viney type, which is another one of these, you want to make sure everything runs with the grain line, or you're going to have, it's going to look kind of lopsided at some point if you throw that on there wrong. This material doesn't matter. I don't think your material is going to matter either, because everything kind of goes all different directions. So if I turn my pattern, this one's not going to matter. But if I had a pattern such as right on top of my sewing box here, and I did it different, it might look kind of funny. Alright, so follow the grain line if you can. Another thing to notice on here is you've got these little arrows. Can you see the little triangle on your pattern? That is a marking that you need to mark. And when I said about bringing a marking pencil, that's part of the reason. Because the patterns I used to use, and there may be some brands that still have that, instead of cutting straight across here, there was this little triangle that came up, and you were supposed to cut around the little triangle that came up or out on the side, and it was easy to cut them off. But that is what you match up your pattern pieces with, where you sew a seam to another, where you sew a seam between two pieces of material. In this case, it's going to be the waistband. We're going to have to match up a mark on the waistband with those marks. So, as you can see possibly in the camera, I did actually cut a little triangle of material above there, but it doesn't have to be cut that way. That is why we also use a marking pencil. I did 2 triangles on the material to make sure that that matched up with the pattern piece. So that's what your marking pencil is for. Before you unpin this, actually before you probably even cut it, you should probably mark all the marks on your pattern onto the material. After it's cut, you'll have to do the reverse side in this case. Something else to note on your pattern is, I think it's on the side facing you, there is a section that says center front, center back, center fold. This is on the skirt on, let's see, front and back A, B, C, D. Since we're using view, we're going to use D, the view D on the pattern. That's why we're using this, because it's D. It says cut 2 on the fold. Right here on the edge of the one, on the one side of the pattern piece, it says center fold. Right there. So when you lay your material down, it's going to be folded in half. This is called the selvage, where it's raw, the raw edges. This is the selvage. So we're not going to put that center fold on there. Instead, where it is folded, we're going to lay it down on the fold. Okay? Because then you only have to cut 3 sides, and when you open it up, it'll be big enough, wide enough, without doing that extra stitch. Some patterns will say you're going to stitch it up the middle anyway. This one does not. So when you lay down your material, it will be folded. You might have to iron yours again to make that work. We'll lay it down. Make sure you line up the center fold. Move this out of the way. Hopefully it shows up easier. Lay down the material flat and spread out as much as necessary. Now I still have a piece fastened on here. And you're going to lay that out on the fold. And then we're going to pin it down onto the material. I usually start with the corner and then make sure the other corner is folded tight. Not folded tight, but placed on there tight enough. Get that pinned down, pin along here. Then if I have to adjust this corner to make sure everything is flat and smooth, I do that. And then kind of make sure everything is, your material is smooth underneath, because then it's ready to cut. Okay? So that's the next step we're going to do. Lay your material out, lay your pattern pieces on it, and we will do all the pattern pieces. Like for instance, this one, because of the way that it's laid out, we will actually follow the pattern. Here it is. This will actually show you how you're going to put it on your pattern. put your pattern on your material. Okay, so there will be a place. This may be different since it's a different size. Well, since we're doing skirt D, and you look at the size of our material, and we're going to follow whichever one we need. I have a 60 wide inch material here. Yours is probably 45, and that's how we're going to lay it out in the thing. Now, the one thing that we're definitely going to probably do is you probably don't want your skirt all the way to the floor. So we are going to do as I did on this one and fold the pattern up. All right, for this one, we have a 45-inch piece of material, 45 inches wide, or about 45 inches wide. It may actually be closer to 43. This is the selvage edge, and this is our fold edge. We did a little bit of ironing to make sure we had a nice fold. And then you take pattern piece 1, we're going to lay it down according to our pattern guide for skirt D. We only have one pattern piece for number 1, which is going to work as both front and back, so we have to use it twice. So we're going to set it up here. We also need part 3. Another thing we had to do was we already adjusted the length. We measured how long she wanted the skirt from her waist to about the middle of her calf. That's how long she wanted the skirt. And right there on the pattern where it says lengthen or shorten here, we just folded the pattern up, made sure the measurements were the same, since this is a very easy pattern to adjust. And so now we have a skirt that's approximately the same length that we measured from her hip to the middle of her calf. So this is actually ready to pin on. When we pin this on, we're gonna pin it on the center fold. Part of the pattern will get pinned right at the center fold on the material, because this is going to get cut out and be twice as large as the pattern piece. So make sure the center fold is on the fold of the material. Otherwise, you're going to have two pieces. You'll have to stitch them together and it would not be the correct size. So when you pin it, well, we probably better move this over just a little bit more. See how it's off. You want it to be down far enough so you're not cutting on that part that shrunk. We'll leave those out. And yes, it's okay to spill a few and then use them up as you go. So you want this to be as close without going over the edge as possible. Right there on the center fold, just match it up. Move your material or your pattern as needed. And that should be good. Now it's probably ready to start. Well, I'm not sure if you want that pulled down just a smidgen from that top. Yeah, that's probably better. And then make sure when you pin, I have a tendency, this is a quilting pin, and for sewing, you usually want the shorter ones. That actually makes it easier. But do you see how I just pinned them together there?
Yeah.
But what you want to do is put several in here, like maybe 3 to 4 inches apart, to make sure that that stays where it's supposed to stay. And then I end up doing lots of smoothing out to make sure everything
How do you
stays
shorten
where it's
it again,
supposed to.
Mom? Or should I actually keep it longer?
No. I folded it up at the bottom. You can see where I folded that one up. Just folded it up. Otherwise, use up at the top the shorten or lengthen. On this one, it's square enough that you could just fold the bottom up. If you had a more rounded or A-line skirt, you would probably want to make sure you did it at the lengthen or shorten line. After you get it pinned on, you want to make sure you mark, like you did, your triangles there, triangles here. And then after you cut this out, you're going to have to flip it over and mark the triangles on the opposite side so that you could match the pieces of material together. So make sure you mark them on both sides after you cut it out,
Wait.
mark the side.
Do I mark them in or out? Because I did out.
You can either mark like you did, or mark like a couple X's or a little V inward like that. See how I did the X? Or up here, instead, because it'll probably get cut off there when you're cutting. So if you mark it a V inward like it shows, it may actually show up. Or just mark an X there so that you know that's your matching spot.
Fabric. If you just cut it so that it's about 1/4 of an inch smaller than what you would cut your other piece, then it will fit nicely on your piece that you're going to iron it to.
All right, so let's cut this one out really quick and then try to get ironed on. Make sure that this.
And obviously you don't have to cut the notches or anything.
Right. So on this one, I can actually just trim this. Since I'm at the edge, I can just trim it out right here.
Mom, for this pattern, do we just have pieces 1, 2, and 3?
Yes. You only need pieces 1, 2, and 3. All right. So on this, maybe just fold this in a little bit. So I have a guideline. Then it's cut a little shorter there. Because if I ever did interfacing, it would have been 30 years ago, and I haven't used it since.
Well, the fusible kind is so much easier to use than the other kind.
And I probably did use the sew-in kind, and that's probably why I never used it again. Okay, so there's the interfacing. Cut just a little bit smaller than my pattern piece. And now we're going to fuse it onto the material. Which, I guess it's actually a little, it is still smaller than my piece, but it probably doesn't matter because it's just to stiffen that, right?
Yes. And whenever you take your seams in, it's going to be about the right place.
All right, so the next thing is, this is the bumpy side, and it gets fused to the material, correct?
Yes, the bumpy side down.
So the bumpy side down, the smooth side up. The bumpy side goes on the wrong side of the material. Okay, here is the piece of interfacing on top of the wrong side of the material. Here's my nice side, my outside. There is the wrong side of the fabric. This is the bumpy side, which is going to go against the wrong side of the material. So this is all nice and smooth here. And what we have to do is put this on a low setting. On my iron it says nylon, which is number 2, and rayon, which is number 3. So I just set it at 1.5, so it's not too hot. If you are going to do something where you would need it hotter, then you should use a piece of material, and this is really too heavy, but you just need a pressing cloth that you could press through there. But since we're just going to do it a later setting, it's ready to go. So start in the middle and just gently glide over the material, and then start in the middle again and go the other direction. All right, let's check it. We know it's done when it's cool. It doesn't come apart. So I might not have done it because it's not there. So I probably have to do it a little bit hotter. Let me do it a little bit hotter. I have not used the fusible interfacing. And I haven't used interfacing in years, so let's let this get a little bit warmer. That's hotter. And I'm just going to run it over again. It's definitely hotter this time. And the reason you would put the pressing cloth on is so you don't get any sticky stuff onto the bottom of your iron. I don't think we're going to have that problem. Let me run this over here again. All right, I think it's sticky enough. We'll just wait a little bit, but that's cool. You can see where it's stuck and where it didn't. See that? So we want it to all be sticky because you don't really want it coming apart before you get it sewed. So that's how you put the interfacing on. All right, this is to make the gathers. The next step on the gathers, this is the top of my skirt, which you can tell because there is my triangle, which I also cut, and my little marking there. And I had actually put an arrow there that said this is the top, but this was where you marked it on the top shows you also. All right, so the instructions say to run a gathering stitch, which is going to be 1/2 inch, according to this, from the edge of your top. So using your guide on there, you're going to run your material along the 1/2 inch mark, and then you're going to run a second stitch along the 5/8. That's what our instructions tell us, and that's what we're going to do. To do the gathering stitch, you want it to be a straight stitch, which this is set for, and you also want it to be the longest stitch that it will go. So on this machine, it's a number 4. Your machine may be different. It may say number 5, depending on your machine. Whatever the longest stitch length is. So let me see if I can get this started. There we go. We're not going to do any back stitching. We're just going to run a straight stitch. Oops. The other thing I should do is make sure I've got plenty of long thread here, which we do here. That's good. You want those to be long. So back down it goes. Let's see. And I'm using white thread just so that this shows up. I'll probably rip it out and put my blue thread in later. Oops. Here you can see I've got a very long stitch there. Okay. This is the back side. It doesn't matter which one of your pieces you use, because they're the same.
Does it matter which side we sew on?
Nope, it doesn't matter. At this point, it doesn't matter either. Yeah, that's helpful, Abby. As it comes to the end, you want to take, oh, this is not the same as mine. You want a long tail here, scissors to cut.
You can cut it there.
Then pull this tail out again so you have a long stitch. Run the next one at 5/8. So this was at 1/2 inch. It's already gathered a little bit. We're going to run the next one at 5/8. So it's going to be pretty close. Alright, so we want a long strip there. Again, just cut that. Okay, the reason for 2 of them is in case one string breaks. Now, here the next part is you're going to separate the bobbin threads, which are on the bottom, from the top threads. So there's my bottom, here's the top. And, Abby, I need a straight pin, please. there's two things you can do. You can either wrap this around a straight pin and pin it in place, which I think I'm going to do. And I'm not exactly good at this. Okay, so this is like wrapping it around like a figure 8. Trying to wrap that around the pin to hold that one in place. That's the top threads, okay? My bottom threads are still there. Now, this is the trick. See, these bottom threads should pull. But once again, this will, you have to do this very gently because these threads can break. And this is how you start to gather. And you just pull the threads gently and run the material along the threads, okay? So now we're gonna pull this. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're gonna pull the bobbin threads. I already kind of tried to tie tight the top threads. Pull the bobbin threads because they will let the material slide a little easier. But you still have to be gentle because they can break. Okay, so we're just gonna move that along. And sometimes they pull really easy. Like if I just pull one, it might pull really easy. It's been a while since I did this. And you just have to do that, the whole length. And then the other side, you can go halfway this way. And then do the other side halfway. And it will be slightly easier. Okay, but the point is, at some point you kind of have to pull both threads. Since you've got 2 threads. One thread works, but again, you could easily break one thread and then you've lost all your gathers at that point. So that's why we have 2. It may take slightly longer to run two of them. I ran a little closer. That's a little harder to get that past. But that is how you do the gathers, okay? Mm-hmm. And then once you get like halfway, and it's going to take a little bit of time because this is a wide skirt at the top. Once you get that halfway, then go to the other side over here, separate those. Whoops, my bobbin thread ran underneath. You got to separate those top threads from the bottom threads. I'll have to pull this off, which somehow I should be able to do, and start pulling that thread to make the gathers here. Let's see if I can pull the top thread. Nope, I haven't both. And if you're pulling, I don't have it separated yet. That's part of the trouble. You need a seam ripper. That would pull my threads apart. There we go. Pull that toward the middle. There we go. Pull that toward the middle. You see how this side's going just a little bit easier? Yeah. And granted, I am only pulling one string, but... And the other thing about this thread is, if you really wanted to take it out in the end, you could, but it's probably just going to get covered up with the waistband. So you probably won't see it. So, but what we have to do is get that all the way gathered. Okay? So that's the start.